This lesson and notes, we're going to be looking at populations of North America. Your essential question is kind of similar to the first one, but we're looking at it in regards to population patterns. It's why do people live where they live in North America? First thing we're going to look at is the actual people, kind of the makeup of the people and where they're located and why. 5% of the world's population lives in North America. A considerable portion of people in North America or in Canada and the United States are immigrants. They make up a big portion of the population in these areas and a big portion of the population of this 5% in the world. Both of them are referred to as cultural melting pots because you have a lot of different cultures that are coming into contact with the area. Next thing I've got on this slide is the waves of immigration. There's really three big waves of immigration in North America. The first is with the Native Americans. What I mean by that is the Beringia Land Strait. Coming across the Beringia Land Strait down into North America, into Canada, and into the United States. The next is the 19th and 18th century types of immigrations. Part of this is from Europe. Your early 18th century immigration is going to be talking about your colonization efforts. And then your 19th century immigration is after the American Revolution. And so you have the United States set up. And it's more people fleeing Europe because of famine and because of oppression and because of those things. The last wave of immigration is the 20th and 21st, the one we're in, centuries of immigration. This is immigration coming from Asia and coming from Latin America for those tertiary and quaternary type jobs for better economic opportunities. Next thing that we're looking at in regards to populations is the actual population density and the distribution. In Canada, most of the people live along the stretch of land that borders the United States. 90% of their population live in the southern part of Canada next to the border of the United States along this narrow strip. The population density of Canada as a whole, again, this is an average, it's 8 people per square mile. 8 people per square mile. That is extremely low, but then think about how much of the vast area in the northern parts of Canada is virtually uninhabited. And that gives you the average. Now, if you took the population density of this little strip of land, it would be a lot higher than this 8. The United States, a lot of people in the United States are congregated in the Sun Belt, which is that warmer area in the south as well as parts of the southwest. And the Rust Belt, which was in the northern central area, the northeastern central area, has then now started to move down into the Sun Belt and in part of these other areas. So you have a lot of people distributed in the Sun Belt region because of manufacturing and tertiary type jobs. And the population distribution of the United States is 77 people per square mile. A lot more than that 8. And again, a lot of that has to do with climate. The next section that we're going to be looking at in regards to population is cities. Okay? Inside of North America, we have urbanization happening, which means more and more people are moving into the cities. And we're getting a lot more metropolitan areas talking about bigger cities. You're seeing a lot more cities get bigger and become kind of metropolitan areas, kind of like the Fort Worth, Dallas, Arlington now, Metroplex. Same thing. It's this metropolitan area with a lot of big cities. What you have, because of this, is you have a lot of people that move into the suburbs, and if you have what starts to form as a metropolitan area, suburbs just then become part of the city themselves as the cities start to expand. But people, the wealthier people generally live in the suburbs and then drive into work because this is generally the more open land, quieter land, and a lot of times it has to do with the smell. It smells a lot better. It's a lot more fresh air. Also in the United States, you start to see more and more megalopolises. This is from a previous unit, but it's when you have a lot of huge cities start to become one big, massive super city. Fort Worth, Dallas, Arlington Metroplex still is not really a megalopolis. Again, the example that I gave you from one of the earlier units, one of the early lessons was Bowash, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. all coming together into one big super city in the Northeast. Next thing, major thing you need to take into account in regards to the distribution of cities in North America is its access to waterways. Cities developed along rivers and oceans and lakes because of transportation and because of being able to get back and forth into areas, and it just made life a whole lot easier. Your last last major heading of today are economic systems of North America. We're going to look at the United States, and then we're going to look at Canada. In the United States, you have one of the world's, or you have the world's largest economy, and that is in the United States. It's the world's largest economy. 10% of all exports throughout the world come from the United States. So that gives you a picture of how much the United States is actually producing. And on the economic spectrum, you've got command on the left, socialism in the middle, and free enterprise on the right. The United States is still a little bit closer to free enterprise, but we are consistently moving more and more towards this direction based off of the decisions that the government's making in regards to things like healthcare and how much money they're putting into the economy and companies that they're buying over and those sorts of things. This is still a continuation of the same unit. I just put United States continued because it's on the other slide. But there's three areas that I really want to focus on in regards to the economy of the United States. Number one, the United States is known as an agricultural giant. The United States is able not only to feed its own people, figuratively, but it's also able to feed the whole world, to produce enough food to feed other people in other parts of the world. After colonization, what happens in the United States in regards to the economy is we open up these global maritime trade networks, which what that means is we're able to trade across globe and across oceans, maritime, and these networks developed after the colonial world, and this is when we really take off and become an industrial or an agricultural giant, is because of these global maritime networks, we're able to ship goods and food in particular to other parts of the world, things such as our cotton, then make it to other parts of the world and make the United States what it is today. We're also known as an industrial giant. What that means is our output is larger than any other nation in the world. Biggest industrial output, biggest exporter of manufactured goods than any other place in the world. This helped us win World War II because we're an industrial giant. We were able to produce things that could be used during the war, and it allowed the Allied powers to win because people stayed home and worked. Again, the Sun Belt is kind of your area where most of these industries are located in today's world. We have the Rust Belt in the Northeast as it's shifting down into the Sun Belt, into the warmer, kind of more mild climate regions. And we also have what I've called the post-industrial era of United States economy. What this means is you have a shift away from agriculture and you have a shift away from the industries into kind of these tertiary type jobs. What you're starting to see is outsourcing of the industrial jobs to other nations, and then tertiary and then some quaternary type jobs becoming available in the United States because of this. A lot of corporations in the United States are now multinational. They're now able to trade with other nations in other parts of the world, and they have different companies set up in different parts of the world. And then last but not least, we're going to look at Canada's economy and their economic spectrum. A lot of Canada's economy is focused around primary industries, but that does not make it a less developed nation. A lot of their primary industries are farming, mining, logging, and even fishing. But again, that does not make them a less developed nation. I don't want you to think that, oh, they have a big primary industry, so that means they have a lot of people doing this. The reason they have a lot of people in these types of primary economic activities, logging, fishing, mining especially, is only 5% of their land is actually arable, which means only 5% of the land can be farmable. So people are going to have to do other things. But this is about 10% of their gross domestic product, their GDP. About 10% of the GDP of Canada comes from the primary type of industries. Their biggest exporter is, let me find it, logging. The forestry industry is their biggest exporter because they got a lot of forests. So you're going to have a lot of the industry in logging. Next major area of their economy is the manufacturing sector of their economy. 15% of the workers in Canada are in the manufacturing sector. So you have a big portion. 1/5 of their GDP is in the manufacturing sector. 1/5 of the gross domestic product comes from things being produced and manufactured within Canada. Most of this is done in the heartland of Canada, kind of the prairie, the core region. That's what we're looking at in regards to the manufacturing sector. This heartland is where Quebec and Ontario is located, and that's where a lot of the manufacturing is taking place. And last but not least, you have the service industry, and the service industry is growing in Canada just like it is in the United States. You're starting to see more and more of these jobs rather than these jobs and these jobs, because that's talking about the country becoming more developed. Canada on the economic spectrum is here. They're located kind of close to socialism, closer to socialism than the United States. The reason for that is the makeup of their government, and which was in a previous unit, kind of the ideas behind their government and what their government does in regards to economic decisions.